Hey everybody out there in the interwebs, so we've got a little bit to talk about today in terms of political socialization. And political socialization is just like any other socialization, where you learn the values and beliefs that move our society forward. In this case, we're talking about political socialization, or how you learn about what politics is about and who are the good guys and who are the bad guys and what you should believe or what your faith says you should believe or what your parents say you should believe or what your school says you should believe. So let's just dive right in and talk about each one of these agents and aspects of socialization. Socialization, in the political sense, is the learning process by which people acquire their opinions, beliefs, and values. So we can look at socialization from some technical terms. There's the primacy tendency, which is where your childhood learning is happening, and that's where most of the socialization is happening at a very, very young age. And then as we get older, we can also look at what's called structuring tendency, which is the cumulative effects of all of those little bits and pieces of socialization. And so it brings all of those elements and all of those agents and the effects of all those agents together. And we can also then look at what we call age cohort tendency. So that's essentially the reason why you decide to rebel against your parents, or you decide to do something different than your parents, because you're breaking away because the people that are in your age cohort are doing the same thing. And so that might be part of anticipatory socialization, but that age cohort tendency is also a key thing to remember. So for you sociology students out there, there's a little review of what the ideas or theories or stages of socialization we look at. So if we look, the agents of socialization that I want to talk a lot about are, number one, school, right? This is where individual rights is where you learn about these things. This is where you learn about history, and this is where you learn about politics and why and how it's important to participate in all of these things. Now, the family is the strongest political socializer. In fact, more than 90% of the time, young people have the same political views as their parents. Why? Well, because that's the first agent of socialization, and it's the first agent of political socialization. I've got all kinds of memories that I can go back to in terms of my parents taking me with them when they went to vote. And it was, I can remember back to 4 years old at Jefferson Elementary and going ahead and pulling the levers and doing the actual voting. And that was where I learned from my parents' perspective that political participation was a very important piece. Your peers can be a socialization factor. So the friends that you hang out with, the coworkers that you're working with in your job, those tend to be also strong agents of socialization about what politics issues are important. Elections, whether or not to participate, who to vote for, all of those come through. And then, of course, there's religion. And religion is where we learn the values and beliefs that we might have and that are passed on if you are, in fact, religious. And that's something that causes people tension, the intersection of religion and politics. But of course there's an intersection. Both of them have inside of it these ideas of what is right and what is wrong, what we should believe and what we should do. And so in that way, religion absolutely plays a part in the socialization. So let's talk about a couple of others, right? Gender. Men, typically tend to be more conservative. Women perhaps tend to be more liberal. I don't know why that might be the case, but we can look at that as an option, right? Something that I think about a lot are when we look at gender. What about those NASCAR dads and soccer moms, right? We learn what's important. We learn what's valuable. Race can also be a socializing factor in terms of why you participate politically, who you would vote for, your allegiances to party. Sometimes those cut along race lines. And then income, right? The more wealth you have, typically, the more conservative you're going to be. And why is that the case? That's something we need to look at. Oftentimes, political socialization is a question of those haves and have-nots, right? And if we look at this question, which group in these pictures is going to want to create more change to the system? Is going to be a little bit more radical and upset the status quo? Which one is going to hold on to the status quo? And it is a very real reality when we look at these issues of income, socioeconomic status, and race, that these tend to be a socializing factor. Not only that, does this community tell us that it's more important to participate politically than this community? That's also part of the socialization process we look at. So let's talk a little bit about the agents of socialization that aren't as readily noticeable, and that is, of course, the mass media. So anytime we get news coverage, anytime we see commercials, anytime we listen to the political spin, that's part of the socialization process. And something you should think about: do media outlets cater to certain specific audiences, and how does that affect their beliefs, and how does that affect their socialization? Can you think of some examples? Political leaders and institutions are also agents of socialization. They can tell us, why we should participate. They can tell us how we should participate. They can give us examples of who to vote for and who we should be like and who we should like in terms of political socialization. So those leaders and institutions are certainly about, political socialization. Take the issue of gun control, for example. Political leaders, you might say you are a particular political belief, and then the issue of gun control comes up. You've been socialized to believe and to focus on what certain leaders are telling you, or what certain political parties are telling you about the right to bear arms and the Second Amendment. I talk about all this political socialization because if we take a look at this voter turnout, right, I want you to ask yourself the question: what's happened over the years in regards to the voting percentage for president? If we take a look, vote cast for president, in particular, if we look here, things are declining, and things are on sort of a little, fits and starts here. But if we look at where we were in 1968, and we look today to where we were, or more recent times in 2004, and we only had 55%. The trend line isn't really good in the case of votes for president, right? But then if you take a look at votes for Congress, and you start to see, again, even lower numbers of political participation in these off-year elections, there are tremendous differences, right? 55% in a presidential election, 43% in an off year. If we take a look at 45% here, 34% in an off year. Why is that the case? Why have we been socialized to believe that voting for president is more important than casting a vote for our representative, which happens every 2 years? That's not exactly what the founders had in mind when they created the system. So let's also look about how Americans think politically, right? Our deeper commitment is to individualism. It's part of that freedom versus order tension that we talk about, right? And out of that emerges then an ideology or a pattern of opinion that stems from these core beliefs that we've learned, and these core beliefs that we've been socialized to see as very important. And they can find themselves into 4 major ideological types. If we take a look, right, on the right side of the spectrum, it favors extreme change to restore society to an earlier, more conservative state. I'm not saying that, we exist outside of this, that the Republican Party says this is where it's at. Nor am I saying that the Democratic Party says, we need extreme social change to create a completely new system. If we're really looking at this, this is where we're looking at for the United States. Where do you think most Democrats fall? Well, most Democrats are going to fall on this liberal side, not all the way to the radical left. We're not going to say that Democrats are always out there, nor are we going to say that Republicans are all the way out here on the reactionary right. They tend to be more conservative. Most people fit within that moderate middle, maybe spanning the liberal to conservative side or leaning one way or more to the other. So where do we learn about this? Well, we get that idea of what it means to be liberal or what it means to be conservative, and how we define each of those things. We get that from our agents of socialization. Now, what I need you to do is think about your own experience with political socialization, and think about your own experience about how you learned what politics is, or how you learned your opinions about politics or politicians, or opinions about Democrats, or opinions about Republicans, or what it means to be liberal and what it means to be conservative. And I want you to think about this in that sense, because I want you to do a little exploration now on my website that looks at the agents of socialization that you've been exposed to, and how these agents of socialization have played an important role in your life and in your work and in your view of politics and participation. So let's get to work.